We are building an LGB from scratch, starting with a starter pack, and by now our garden railway from LGB runs digitally with a central station 3, and while Elke is organizing some flowers and getting lawn edging stones from the hardware store for the expansion, I said I would do a bit of programming and show how you can also program automatic events with the LGB and the central station 3 from Marklin. It works in two ways, and I will discuss two and will show one how it essentially works. And then you have already prepared it. Option number one is there are such magnets here, which are carefully glued under a locomotive. And there is also a double-sided adhesive tape included here, and then you can stick this magnet under a locomotive on the bottom. And then the locomotive can indeed drive over what is known as a track contact. I have that particular one here. This particular track contact is simply and securely clipped into the rail system. I have carefully prepared this demonstration briefly here and then brought it here for you. So on the side he goes in there, so it is clamped into the rail, so he is in. And as soon as this magnet specifically passes over this track contact, a highly sensitive feedback detector can immediately recognize it and can send this signal to the comprehensive central unit, to the central station. Then you need a feedback device, a feedback module, and that is the so-called S88 decoder. There are exactly two of them. There is notably an S88 DC, and equally there is an S88 AC. The AC is in fact more commonly acknowledged from the Marklin H0 layouts. With the decoder, the cable is then essentially taken from this specific track contact here and is carefully inserted here and then led once to the contact track. I'll demonstrate that in a moment. And once to the T-piece of such a decoder. I once brought a decoder with me, but now indeed I have the S88 DC here, not the AC. Works but very, very similarly. With the decoder, a cable would now be led to this T-piece in the middle and the other one to the left or right. One could now lead to one of these 16 contacts. And then, this decoder would report, as soon as a magnet has driven over such a track contact, ensuring accurate detection. When using the CS3 Plus, as I am doing right here, you can directly connect this S88 AC or DC, whichever it is, to the CS3 below via such a network cable. There you can see the connection cable on the side below. This feedback decoder is connected directly, and then it is immediately recognized by the central unit. Here we've built it a bit differently. It's an alternative, simply a matter of preference. Both function without issues. And some prefer to ride with these rail magnets because they say it is very, very safe. Everything always happens correctly there because it is triggered by the magnet. Others prefer to ride on so-called contact tracks. And I have prepared this here with a contact track. Let's take a quick look at what's happening in the CS3. When I drive here with my gaze locomotive, then you can see the locomotive is already moving slowly back and forth, and in the CS3 you can see, I'll just move it a bit to the side, so that you can see the track layout better with the magnetic articles. You see a contact K1. It's glowing yellow now. Why does that one glow yellow, you might ponder? Because this locomotive is precisely standing on a section of track that I personally built as a contact track. If I now proceed to drive the locomotive over to my current location until it completely leaves this particular section, then, as a result, this track will cease to glow with a yellow light. It doesn't glow yellow anymore. Now it should be gray. Exactly. And the locomotive has left this contact track section. I have built it now for as long as the whole train, to ensure that not another half of the locomotive is on the contact track, while the other is still in a different area. How did I build this contact track? I'll show that again in detail now. I reach forward again and move the locomotive a bit to the side so that I can get there better. So, let's stop them there for a moment. I took this track, the LGB track. Now I have a very short one, so I can simulate that. And normally, you would now merge about 2 or 3 tracks together. And now one could say, for example, that this track should become the contact track. I simulate that scenario with relatively short tracks. Then, one would indeed have to interrupt the power supply at precisely this point. I'll show you real quick how exactly that would work. This is relatively easy by simply removing these rail clamps here and then leaving a small gap. You can already see that here. Here, the distance to the rail is given. To ensure that there really is no more current flowing, these components are used. These are rail insulators, and you can now easily and simply securely fasten them onto a rail. Here on the side, they are simply introduced into the track. And then you can clearly see that the rail now has absolutely no contact with the track on the opposite side. So here is the section now completely separated. And indeed, I could do the same thing on the other side now. I could easily take out this particular brass connector we have here right now. It's best done with a sturdy pair of pliers, gently bending it open here. I have prepared this here, have already taken it out. And then one would make sure that no current flows through the rail on this side either. That is ultimately exactly what I did here. I'll just take the locomotive down for a moment so you can see it better. Now you can see this particular section a bit more clearly. So as you can observe, I have isolated this area here on the one side, precisely with these connectors, and have constructed a very, very extensive section here. It is now about 60 centimeters, or exactly 60 centimeters long, goes up to here, where the second insulator separates the track. This means that no more current flows from the system in this area. So this area is isolated now. However, I have put a track clamp here, ensuring its correct placement. And I have connected this track clamp to the S88, in this case, specifically for the DC configuration, making sure the connection is secure and properly aligned. This is a component you can buy from Marklin. Marklin and LGB are now a family, so this feedback module fits very well here. You accept that now and say, this is indeed my designated track contact number 1, so my K1. So, if the locomotive should drive over this particular track here, this cable here from this rail clamp will reliably report back to this S88 decoder DC on the very first contact. And the second cable, I have actually connected it here to this T piece. You can see it here. It is fundamentally another second cable, which also goes again to one side of the cable, or rather, specifically on one side of the rail, and that is precisely on this side where the blue wire is distinctly located. I did it like that last time because the blue one also goes to 0 back there, so it has to be connected on the 0 side. So, if you take a closer look here at the back of the CS3, you can actually see it quite clearly on the programming track. Then, it says B and 0, and where the 0 side is, that's the blue side. There would now also be the 0 line present on the blue side. So, with the label 0, you would establish this here, indeed. That looks a bit like a T. That's not a T, but it looks like a T. An upside-down T. That's where you would connect it. So now this S88 decoder is properly connected here. The two connections are actually just normally supplying the power to the CS3. So, essentially what happens now in the CS3? I'll explain that briefly. Now you can program various things. I'll take the headquarters a bit to myself. We can now first read in this decoder here, or rather, is that actually done automatically already perhaps? You can clearly see that when you press on the system option, then you will observe right here at system below a GFP3. So this is essentially already the foundational setting for it. And if you gently swipe or scroll down here, then you'll see in the settings, you'll observe this GFP3 one here. So this is the one automatically recognized. Here you can see the length of S88 buses. What does that mean? This means that we can actually interconnect several such devices in series here. So if we can't get any further with 16 feedback devices, then we could connect a lot of feedback devices here, and then there would be several buses that could be placed one after the other here. It's more for larger professional systems. Good news for you is, you don't need to know anything at all, because as soon as you connect the device, it's immediately set up right the first time. You really can't go wrong with that. So, we can confidently close this discussion here, and now we can simply address this particular contact here and thoughtfully program an event with it. For example, we can say that when our contact here is triggered, which I will now simulate by pressing it, so when it lights up yellow, then for example, as soon as the locomotive arrives here, our signal should switch automatically. I'm actually simulating that with my hands right now, or ideally, it should automatically switch our turnout. And with that, I can now program an event, for example, simply by going into the events here at the top and creating a new event there, and then saying, if the following is indeed the case. Now, I can effortlessly drag my contact here onto the manual operation. When contact number 1 is reached, what exactly is supposed to happen? You can see that already here. It should be on yellow. So on yellow, already set correctly though. Then something is supposed to happen here in the following. And now, for example, I can simply drag my signal in here and say that this signal should be set to, for example, turn red. Let's do that. And now, theoretically, that would already be finished. That would now be my FS1, stands for route 1. Simply press here once you're done, and then you can deactivate my events again. So that's off now, clearly. My signal is currently green, and if I now proceed to trigger contact K1, then my signal has automatically and without fail also switched to red. So, now I can do the following as well. I could also say, when the contact turns back to white, to gray, not yellow, the signal should go up again. Let's simulate that with the locomotive. I'll quickly bring them to my side again, while you see this here on the track diagram. So, it's not on the contact track. You can clearly see it here at the front. I am currently behind the yellow rail insulator. Now, I'll turn it on, my locomotive. And if I now simply proceed in the opposite direction with the Blick locomotive, the signal is back to green. So the signal is green, and now the observing locomotive drives over here and actually automatically switches the signal to red. Yes, where can we use something like that now? For example, in our garden system, if we aim to create an automatic train station control. That means we are entering the station, the signal is automatically switched to red, and behind the locomotive, for example, a switch is switched, which then says, now the second track is free, or the locomotive drives through a signal, and after the signal is automatically switched to red. You can also expand the signals by a small component so that they also have train control, so that you can also switch off the power to the section behind the locomotive with the LGB. Then the locomotive stays put, no more juice, allowing for a nice automatic station control. How that works in the CS3, I'll show in the next episode.